What if the lives we think we know are just the first chapter? This is a story of collisions, of worlds, of hearts, and the chaos that binds them. Subscribe to Whispers of the Mind if you dare to see beyond the surface. Chapter 1: A World of Contrasts. Elena. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a sterile glow over the marble floors as Elena scrubbed. Her knees throbbed from hours of kneeling, her hands raw beneath the frayed edges of yellow rubber gloves. At 34, she had memorized the rhythm of the midnight shift, emptying trash bins that reeked of stale coffee, 3 precise sprays of disinfectant per surface, and the occasional muttered thanks from employees who never quite met her eyes. Tonight, the building felt especially empty. Her footsteps echoed down the vacant hallways like whispers of a life she might have lived. Her world was a carefully managed ledger of sacrifices. 2 jobs to cover her mother's rising medical bills, a studio apartment in East Heights that doubled as a storage unit for her brother Marco's perpetually about to make it big band equipment, and a social life confined to the dog-eared pages of romance novels she devoured during her 20-minute lunch breaks on the loading dock. Daniel. 3 floors above, Daniel Whitaker III stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his father's downtown office, scowling at the city sprawled beneath him like a circuit board of dreams and disappointments. At 28, he had mastered the art of appearing untouchable. Charcoal Armani suit hanging effortlessly on broad shoulders, a Rolex Daytona glinting under platinum cufflinks, and a practiced smile that never quite reached his hazel eyes. But tonight, the weight of his father's latest ultimatum pressed against his ribs like a stone. Marry the heiress or lose the inheritance. His father's voice still lingered in the air long after the oak door had slammed shut. Billion-dollar empire at his fingertips, golden handcuffs locked tight around his wrists, and a heart that felt like a ghost town, all storefronts and no substance. He loosened his tie, exhaling sharply, choking on privilege. The spark. 2 worlds, 1 collision, a janitor's mop, a billionaire's latte, and a book that changed everything. Elena's mop handle caught on a loose tile she had meant to report for weeks, jerking the bucket forward with unexpected force. Cold coffee, a Veni hazelnut latte with an extra shot Daniel had abandoned after 2 sips, cascaded over his shoes, the dark liquid pooling around his hand-stitched Ferragamo loafers. Jesus Christ, he started, stepping back, his face a mix of shock rather than anger. Elena's heart lurched, calculating the cost of those shoes against her weekly paycheck. I'm so sorry. Let me. She dropped to her knees, rags in hand, years of apologizing for existing, making the motion automatic. But Daniel's voice stopped her, softer than she expected. Wait. He knelt beside her, his suit crinkling in protest. Designer fabric meeting industrial tile. It's fine. They're just shoes. Just shoes. The words hung between them in the still hallway. $300 minimum, Elena guessed. But something in his tone made her risk a glance up. His eyes weren't cold or contemptuous, as she had expected, but weary, like the protagonist in her latest novel, burdened by the weight of an invisible cage. For a moment, neither of them moved, caught in the strange intimacy of shared space. The connection. Daniel noticed the book first, peeking from her weathered messenger bag. Pride and Prejudice lay open, its spine cracked in multiple places, the pages thin from repeated readings. Jane Austen fan? The question escaped before he could stop it. Elena hesitated, one hand still clutching a coffee-soaked rag. It's escapism, she admitted, a half-smile transforming her tired face. Beats scrubbing toilets in my head for the 1,000th time. He smirked, shifting more comfortably despite his ruined loafers. Darcy's an ass. All pride, no heart. Until the end, at least. Till he meets Elizabeth, she countered, her voice warming. You ever actually read it? Or are you one of those people who just watch the movie? My sister made me watch the miniseries during a particularly brutal winter break at our lake house. 6 hours of Colin Firth brooding and diving into ponds. I may have developed Stockholm Syndrome by the end. They laughed, hers a quiet melody, his a surprised bark. the sound bouncing off the empty corridor walls. Elena gestured to his Rolex with a sudsy glove. You don't strike me as a book guy, more of a spreadsheet aficionado. Guilty as charged. But I'm a sucker for a redemption arc. His gaze flicked to her calloused hands, then back to her face, noticing for the first time the intelligence in her dark eyes. Maybe we're both writing one. The moment stretched between them, fragile as spun glass, neither quite believing the unexpected understanding blooming in the sterile corporate hallway at 1:17 a.m. Chapter 2. An Unexpected Meeting. The awkward dance. They circled each other like wary cats in the midnight quiet of the empty office floor. Elena, cheeks flushed with embarrassment, insisted on cleaning the coffee mess. You don't have to, she began, tucking a strand of dark hair behind her ear. I want to, Daniel interrupted, rolling up his crisp white sleeves. He knelt beside her, the action so foreign to his usual demeanor that it felt like stepping into someone else's life. Their hands nearly touched as they both reached for the same rag. Elena pulled back, her eyes dropping. Daniel noticed a small tattoo on her wrist, a constellation of stars barely visible beneath her watchband. Silence stretched, broken only by the rhythmic squeak of wet paper towels and the distant hum of the building's HVAC system. The city lights winked through the windows, silent witnesses to their midnight encounter. The connection deepens. That copy looks well loved, Daniel said, nodding at the tattered paperback in her bag. Elena blinked. You recognize Austin from just the binding? Summers in the Hamptons. Rainy weekends. My sister forced me through every adaptation. I complained, but secretly. You like them, she finished, smiling. Let me guess, Darcy. He starts as a pretentious ass, Daniel admitted. But he redeems himself. There's hope for us all, I suppose. As they worked side by side, conversation flowed. They talked about books, Elena's passion evident in her animated gestures, Daniel's knowledge surprising them both. They discussed corporate absurdities, the emptiness of board meetings, and executives who couldn't find their own trash bins. I've always wanted to open a bookstore, Elena confessed. Just a place where books find the right people, with mismatched chairs and a cat that hates everyone except the quiet readers. Daniel nodded, imagining it with unexpected clarity. Corner location, big windows. You read my mind. What about you? If you weren't this. She gestured vaguely at his suit, his watch, all the trappings of his life. Daniel hesitated. I haven't read for pleasure since college. Haven't done much of anything for pleasure, really. The clock on the wall read 2:13 a.m. Soon the night would end. And with it, this strange pocket of honesty between two people who never should have crossed paths. Chapter 3. Breaking Down Barriers. Coffee and conversations. Daniel began appearing on Tuesday nights like clockwork, his arrival coinciding with Elena's break. The first time, he startled her by emerging from the elevator at 1:14 a.m., 2 paper cups in hand. To apologize for the shoes, he explained, extending a latte toward her. The gesture hung between them, both knowing the cost of the drink equaled roughly 20 minutes of her labor. The break room became their neutral territory, a fluorescent-lit no-man's land where the rules of their respective worlds seemed temporarily suspended. Elena brought her French press from home and taught him the ritual. The precise water temperature, the 4-minute steep, the slow plunge that transformed ordinary grounds into something worth savoring. You're pressing too fast, she chided one night, her hand covering his to demonstrate the proper pressure. The casual touch lingered a moment too long. Daniel's coffee education came with a price. Elena's literary habits were subject to his mock horror. You're a monster, he declared, watching her fold the corner of a page in her battered copy of East of Eden. Bookmarks exist for a reason. So do dog ears, she countered, deliberately creasing another page while maintaining eye contact. Books should show they've been loved. These midnight exchanges took on a rhythm of their own, existing outside the structured timetables that governed their lives. Sometimes they spoke of nothing consequential, films they'd seen, childhood memories, the merits of vinyl records. Other times, the conversation veered into deeper waters without warning. "You're not what I expected," Daniel admitted one night, watching her methodically clean the French press. Elena raised an eyebrow, amused. "What did you expect? A cleaning lady with a heart of gold and tragic backstory." "Something like that," he confessed, embarrassed. "Well, rich people aren't all bad," she countered with a half smile. "And cleaners aren't all tragic. We contain multitudes, Whitaker." She flicked soap suds in his direction, breaking the tension. The vulnerability. The following Tuesday, Elena found Daniel already in the break room, staring at his phone, his usual composure fractured. His tie hung loose around his neck, his hair disheveled from repeated raking of fingers. "My father's cutting me off. Again." The words emerged flat, stripped of emotion. "Unless I propose to Caroline Astor by the fundraiser next month." Elena sat across from him, silent. The surname triggered recognition, even in her world. The Astors were American royalty. "Is she nice at least?" she ventured. Daniel's laugh held no humor. "Caroline's perfectly pleasant. We've known each other since prep school. She'll make an excellent corporate wife, host flawless dinner parties, and produce 2 heirs right on schedule." "Sounds like a Jane Austen nightmare," Elena murmured. Something in her tone made Daniel look up, really look at her. "What would you do?" he asked suddenly. "If you were me?" The question hung between them, weighty with implications neither was ready to examine. Elena hesitated, then made a decision. She pulled out her phone, opening a medical billing app with a balance that made Daniel's eyes widen. "My mother's MS treatments," she explained, her voice steady. "Insurance covers about half. Then there's my brother Marco, 3 stints in rehab, still struggling. I work 62 hours a week across 2 jobs, and I'm still drowning." She put the phone away, meeting his gaze directly. "So I get it, the golden handcuffs. Different scale, same trap." Daniel sat motionless, absorbing her words. For once, he didn't offer solutions or platitudes. He simply listened, really listened, his eyes never leaving her face. "How do you not hate people like me?" he asked finally, his voice barely audible. Elena considered this, head tilted. "Same reason you don't pity people like me. We're both just trying." In that moment, something shifted between them. The carefully maintained distance collapsed under the weight of shared vulnerability. For the first time in years, Elena didn't feel invisible, and Daniel didn't feel alone. Question for reflection. When have you opened up to someone unexpected? How did it feel? Chapter 4. Finding Common Ground. The twist. Daniel's revelation came with the sunrise, watching the amber glow spill across his penthouse floor. He'd spent 30 years as a passenger in his own life. Maybe it was time to take the wheel. His trust fund sat largely untouched, his personal rebellion against dependency. Now, it could serve a different purpose. 3 phone calls, 2 meetings, and 1 nervous real estate agent later, Daniel secured a lease on a failing hardware store in Elena's neighborhood. The brick building with weather-beaten awnings and grimy windows wasn't much to look at, but he saw what it could become: Elena's books and brew. He hired contractors who worked nights, transforming the space into a warren of oak shelves and reading nooks. He sourced first editions of her favorite classics alongside local authors she'd mentioned. The coffee counter, crafted from reclaimed barnwood, featured a top-of-the-line espresso machine. Every detail planned with Elena's offhand comments in mind. But he kept his distance from the project, insisting on anonymity with the workers. She would succeed on her own merits, not as a billionaire's pet project. This would be hers, truly hers, down to the last dog-eared page. Meanwhile, Elena found herself scribbling business plans on breakroom napkins. Daniel's vulnerability had sparked something in her. If he could question his gilded path, perhaps she could forge a new one. She began auditing night classes at the community college, slipping into the back row of business, 101 still wearing her cleaning uniform. "I'll never finish my degree," she admitted to herself in the bathroom mirror one exhausted morning. "But I'll be damned if I don't try." conflict. The grand opening of Elena's Books and Brew was perfection. Local authors reading poems, children sprawled on hand-woven rugs, the scent of fresh coffee mingling with new paper. Elena floated through her dream made manifest, still disbelieving. The anonymous investor's lawyer had called it a grant for promising entrepreneurs. No repayment necessary. Daniel arrived late, hat pulled low, sunglasses unnecessary in the evening light, but providing convenient cover. He watched Elena from a corner, pride swelling as she charmed customers and recommended titles with infectious enthusiasm. When their eyes met across the room, her smile nearly buckled his knees. That moment, her triumph, his witness, was captured by a telephoto lens from across the street. The paparazzi photos hit the internet on Tuesday morning. By noon, Elena's phone wouldn't stop vibrating with notifications. Whitaker Aircourt's custodial staff, charity stunt or true love. Beneath the lurid headline, Elena, radiant in her moment of achievement, and Daniel, his hand outstretched toward her, his expression naked with admiration. The article speculated crudely about his motives, dissected her background, and revealed the source of the bookstore's funding. Elena's hands trembled as she read, bile rising in her throat. Her dream, her achievement, reduced to a tabloid punchline, a footnote in the Whitaker saga. Outside her store, 3 photographers waited, hoping to capture her reaction. That night, she left the closed sign up and waited in the darkened shop. Daniel arrived at 8:17, bearing flowers and apologies. "You didn't think to tell me?" she demanded, shoving her phone at him, the article still displayed. Her voice echoed in the empty store. "That you were my mysterious benefactor." Daniel's face fell. "I wanted it to be yours," he insisted, setting the flowers on the counter untouched. "No strings, no headlines, just you and your dream." "But there are strings." She gestured wildly at the shop around them. "You funded this. What am I supposed to think? That you believe I can't do it alone? I think you're extraordinary because you've done everything alone." He ran a hand through his hair, frustration evident. I wanted to give you a fighting chance. The system is rigged against people like you." "A fighting chance?" She laughed, the sound brittle as glass. "You don't get it. This isn't a fairy tale, Daniel. I don't need a prince to rescue me. I need a partner who sees me as an equal." The word hung between them, partner, with all its unexamined implications. "They're calling me your charity case," she continued, voice lower now. "Your good deed for the quarter. Do you have any idea what that feels like?" Daniel stared at her. The distance between their worlds suddenly a chasm again. His privilege, the very thing he tried to leverage for her benefit, had blinded him to her need for autonomy, for dignity. "I'm sorry," he said finally, the words inadequate. "I thought I was helping, but I was just controlling things, like my father would." The comparison landed like a physical blow. Elena saw the genuine pain in his eyes, the realization dawning that his attempt to help had only reinforced the imbalance between them. "What do we do now?" she asked, suddenly exhausted. Question for reflection. How do you balance helping others without overstepping? Have you ever felt patronized? Chapter 5. A Lasting Impact. Resolution. Daniel returned to the bookstore at dawn, finding Elena arranging inventory, dark circles beneath her eyes. No flowers in his hands this time, no grand gestures, just humility carved into the lines of his face. "I've been thinking about what you said," he began, helping her unpack a box of poetry collections without being asked. "About not needing a prince." Elena shelved Dickinson with more force than necessary. "And you were right." He selected his words carefully, each one weighed and measured. "I was trying to fix your life because it was easier than fixing mine. But you don't need saving. You're extraordinary because of your struggles, not despite them." The simplicity of his admission hung in the morning light. No defensiveness, no justification, just truth. Elena's shoulders relaxed slightly. "I'm still mad," she said, but the edge in her voice had softened. "But thank you for seeing me." The real me, not some project. I'd like to make it right, he said. Not with money or connections. Just as me. She considered him. This man who'd crossed worlds to stand beside her, who'd stumbled badly, but was willing to learn. I'd like that too. The future. They didn't become lovers or business partners, as the tabloids had predicted. What grew between them was something rarer, more enduring. They became family. Chosen bonds forged in understanding rather than obligation or romance. Elena's shop evolved into a neighborhood cornerstone. She hired local students, hosted authors overlooked by mainstream publishers, and created a scholarship fund for first-generation college applicants. The paid-forward shelf allowed customers to purchase books for strangers who couldn't afford them. Daniel, inspired by her example, resigned from his father's company. He liquidated assets, much to his financial advisor's horror, and established Cornerstone, a nonprofit providing microloans and mentorship to small businesses in overlooked communities. His business acumen, freed from the constraints of maximizing shareholder value, found purpose in sustainability and local impact. The tabloids eventually lost interest when no scandal materialized. Occasionally, someone would recognize Daniel as he stocked shelves during Elena's inventory days, but the headlines faded as their friendship deepened. 6 months after the grand opening, Elena's books and brew had become a sanctuary. The fireplace crackled in the reading nook, casting amber light across mismatched armchairs. Shelves lined with deliberately dog-eared classics stood alongside debut novels from voices rarely heard. A resident cat, one-eyed and imperious, supervised operations from the windowsill. They met on the shop's anniversary, sitting on stools behind the espresso machine after closing. Elena wore her reading glasses on a chain now, a concession to her 40th birthday. Daniel had grown a beard that made him look less like a Whitaker heir and more like himself. "You ever think we'd end up here?" she asked, handing him a mug of French press prepared exactly as she taught him months ago. "Here," as in smelling perpetually like coffee grounds and old paper. He grinned, the expression genuine now, reaching his eyes. "Never my wildest dreams." Seriously, she nudged his shoulder with hers. "You could have walked away after the mess I made that night. Most people would have. Most people haven't had someone see through their bullshit the way you saw through mine." Daniel traced the rim of his mug, choosing his words with care. "You made me see what actually matters." He paused, his expression shifting. "You know, my dad called yesterday. He's trying, I think. We're meeting for dinner next week." Elena's eyebrows shot up, the mighty Whitaker extending an olive branch. "More like a twig, but it's something." Daniel laughed softly. 2 years ago, I would have refused or turned it into a power play. Now I just want to listen." Elena squeezed his hand briefly. "Go easy on him." Even Darcy had his redeeming moments. Daniel returned the pressure, their calloused fingers. Hers from years of labor, his now from building bookshelves and community gardens, a testament to the distance they'd both traveled. Outside, the city continued its rhythmic pulse. Inside, in the quiet space between privilege and struggle, two people who might never have met in the ordinary course of events sat companionably in the world they'd created together, one French press at a time. Chapter 6: The Renovation Debacle. Absurd ambitions. "I promise, your eyes can stay closed for just 30 more seconds," Daniel insisted, guiding Elena through the door of her bookstore with his hands on her shoulders. 3 weeks of minor upgrades had stretched into a month-long closure. Daniel's enthusiasm had been infectious, until now, as Elena peeked through her fingers at what had once been her tasteful, understated sanctuary. Her bookstore had been transformed into what could only be described as a literary funhouse designed by a committee of hallucinating tech brothers. A massive brass contraption dominated the center of the room, part library ladder, part plumbing nightmare, with copper pipes zigzagging up to the ceiling. "That's the Biblio Brewmaster 3000, announced a woman with electric blue hair and a jumpsuit the color of toxic waste. It's a fully functional espresso/matcha/kombucha dispensary that follows you as you browse. Elena's gaze drifted upward to where her simple reading nook had been replaced by what appeared to be a suspended cocoon made entirely of recycled neckties. The walls now featured shelves shaped like giant books that periodically emitted quotes from famous authors in automated voices with questionable accents. Shakespeare intoned, "T.O. Bean or not to bean, that is the cappuccino." Elena stared, speechless. "Daniel, this is unique." Unique. The designer, Zephyr something or other, clutched invisible pearls. "This is art." The latter brews matcha while you browse. The Thai hammock uses resonant frequency to stimulate your frontal lobe while you read. "We're disrupting the bookstore paradigm." "It's a bookstore," Elena deadpanned. "Not a circus. People come here to read and drink coffee, not to be waterboarded with matcha from a steampunk octopus." Daniel winced, taking in the full scope of the disaster. "I may have over-delegated and possibly approved the concept boards after that third scotch at the foundation dinner." The viral mishap. It started innocently enough. A pink-haired girl recording herself beside the Thai hammock. "You guys, I found the weirdest rich person vanity project ever." By noon, 3 more TikTokers had arrived. By closing time, a dozen. The video spread like wildfire, with captions that cut to Elena's core. "Is this a library or a Wes Anderson fever dream?" Plot twist, the books are empty. He's laundering money via lattes. Billionaire boyfriend builds Burning Man bookstore for basic barista. The grand reopening became a circus. Influencers swarmed the shelves, posing with books they never intended to purchase. A bearded man in suspenders tried to deconstruct the espresso ladder for an Engineering Fails podcast. 2 lifestyle bloggers nearly came to blows over prime hammock selfie positioning. Elena retreated to the supply closet with a plate of stolen croissants, texting Daniel, "Your friends are filming my humiliation. Bring wine or don't come back." The TikTok storm. At Glam Life, Lena's video exploded overnight. 15 seconds of pure, viral gold. Her perfectly manicured hand panned across the bookstore, while her voice dripped with manufactured, POV. "You're a billionaire side chick, and he gifts you a library that brews matcha." Mood. By dawn, #LadderBay and #Thai hammock were trending. A Reddit thread titled, "Ridiculous Ways Billionaires Launder Money" featured Elena's shop prominently. Morning news shows sent reporters for live segments. Elena arrived at 6 a.m. to find a line snaking around the block. The crowd was an unholy alliance of influencer wannabes, curious onlookers, and conspiracy theorists. A man wearing an aluminum foil hat stood on a milk crate, shouting to the crowd, "That ladder is a mind control portal, people. They're programming you through the matcha. Fight the system. By 1984, they don't want you to read it." Chaos unleashed. Inside was worse. The Biblio Brewmaster 3000 had developed a pressure issue overnight and now sprayed matcha in unpredictable bursts, staining a rare first edition of Moby Dick a sickly green. The Thai hammock's support mechanism creaked ominously as a toddler swung in it, screaming, "I'm a spaceship," while his mother filmed for her mommy blog. Zephyr the designer dashed around in platform boots, shouting contradictory instructions. Counterclockwise on the kombucha valve. No, that's the nitrogen infuser. A group of teenagers tried to hack the talking bookshelf, reprogramming Hemingway to say inappropriate things about cats and alcohol. The cash register reimagined as a Rube Goldberg machine that stamped each receipt with literary quotes. Jammed spectacularly, shooting paper into a customer's macchiato. Elena barricaded herself in the supply closet, staring blankly at the wall while clutching a croissant like a stress ball. Her phone buzzed with Daniel's text. Saw the TikTok. "I'll be there in 10. Don't kill the designer. Her father owns half of Silicon Valley." The viral redemption. After 30 minutes of hyperventilating among the paper supplies, Elena had an epiphany. If social media had created this nightmare, perhaps it could fix it. She emerged from a closet, snatched a phone from a startled teenager, and aimed it at herself. The chaos continued around her as she spoke directly to the camera. "Hi, I'm Elena. Yes, I used to be a janitor. No, Daniel's not my sugar daddy. He's just a well-meaning disaster who thinks innovation requires more gears than common sense. But if you actually want to buy a book instead of just pretending to read for your followers, please do. Just don't touch the ladder. It's possessed." She panned to show the Biblio brewmaster spurting matcha onto Zephyr, who was now weeping dramatically beside it. This is what happens when rich people try to help. They mean well, but they've never cleaned their own bathrooms. The teenager posted the video immediately. Within hours, it outperformed the original. Comments flooded in. "I'd buy War and Peace just to watch her roast rich people. Now, I want a coffee machine ladder. Thanks, capitalism." The janitor energy is immaculate. She's seen things. By closing time, they'd sold out of 3 sections. Elena stood amid the wreckage, exhausted but oddly triumphant. Daniel approached cautiously, bearing a bottle of wine and takeout. "I'm sorry," he offered. "I just wanted to help." Elena sighed, eyeing the ladder that now leaked a mysterious blue liquid. "Your help is terrifying. Next time, ask before you reinvent the wheel." Daniel nodded, chastened. "How about I just fund the repairs? Back to the original design." "Not entirely," Elena mused, glancing at the line still waiting outside. "Maybe we keep one talking bookshelf. The properly programmed one." From across the room, Hemingway's voice boomed. "The world breaks everyone, and afterward, many are strong at the broken latte machine." Question for reflection. When has chaos forced you to get creative? How did you turn a mess into a message? Chapter 7. The Media Circus. Gold digger or genius? The New York Post headline screamed above Elena's coffee cup. Janitor mogul. From mops to millions? She nearly choked on her croissant. Within a week, she'd been rebranded. No longer Elena Vasquez, bookstore owner. Now she was the janitor mogul, a calculating seductress who'd apparently engineered an elaborate scheme to separate a billionaire from his fortune via literature and lattes. "Look at this," she said, sliding her phone to Daniel across her kitchen table. "Page 6 says I've been cultivating you for years. Apparently, I deliberately spilled that coffee on your shoes as part of my master plan." Daniel squinted at the screen. "That's ridiculous. You didn't even know who I was. Tell that to your mother." Constance Whitaker, socialite extraordinaire and professional disapprover, had taken her concerns national. That morning's Good Morning America featured her in Chanel tweed, clutching a copy of Pride and Prejudice like it contained anthrax. "My son is under spell," she insisted to a visibly uncomfortable Ginger Matthews. "Elena is using dark magic via literature." She waved the book dramatically. "She's brainwashed him with these novels." Ginger blinked. "Are you suggesting reading is witchcraft, Mrs. Whitaker? Have you seen what's in these books?" Constance flipped to a random page. "All this talk of passion and prejudice. It's dark magic." Elena, now reluctantly internet famous, stared at the television in disbelief before grabbing her phone and typing furiously. "If I'm a witch, why does my spell involve cleaning toilets and selling Dickens? Someone get this woman a library card. #blessed, #witches read books." The tweet went viral before she finished her coffee. The talk show fiasco. The invitation arrived via Daniel's publicist. The Tonight Show with Jax DeSanto wanted them both. "It's damage control," the publicist insisted. "Human interest. America loves an unlikely friendship." Daniel, pacing Elena's tiny office behind the bookstore, looked ill. "We don't have to do this." "Your mother called me a witch on national television," Elena reminded him, sorting invoices. "I'd like the opportunity to prove I don't have a cauldron. Thanks." 3 weeks later, they found themselves in NBC's green room. Daniel, vibrating with anxiety, had downed 3 double espressos in rapid succession. Elena, outwardly calm but inwardly terrified, had borrowed a blazer from her sister-in-law and practiced cutting remarks in the mirror all morning. Remember, Daniel's publicist hissed before disappearing. No politics, no religion, and for God's sake, don't mention the ladder. Pre-show panic. What if I say something stupid? Daniel whispered, pacing the green room. His eyes were wild, pupils dilated from caffeine. What if I mention the compost cookies incident? Or your brother's band playing at the shop? Or how we both cried during that dog commercial? Elena caught him by the shoulders, straightening his askew tie. Breathe, Whitaker. Just be yourself. Well, maybe 30% less yourself. She paused. Don't let them call me a gold digger. And please stop quoting Mr. Darcy when you're nervous. The internet cannot handle you saying you have bewitched me, body and soul, on national television. Noted. He swallowed hard. But you do bewitch. Stop. Now. A production assistant appeared. 2 minutes. The interview from hell. Spotlights. Applause. Jax DeSanto's megawatt smile gleaming like a predatory animal's. Elena felt herself guided to a couch that somehow seemed both too soft and too exposed. So, Jax clapped his hands. Daniel Whitaker III, heir to the Whitaker media empire, and Elena Vasquez, former janitor turned bookstore owner and social media sensation. The audience hooped. Elena felt her cheeks burn. Let's get right to what everyone wants to know, Jax continued, leaning forward conspiratorially. Are you two together? Before either could answer, a voice shouted from the audience. Just kiss already. Daniel choked on his water. Elena, summoning every ounce of her dignity, raised an eyebrow. Only if you count arguing over bookshelf alignment as romance, she quipped. He thinks alphabetical, I think by genre. It's been our biggest fight. Daniel, recovering, wiped his mouth. She's my intellectual soulmate. We're getting another coffee machine ladder. His delivery was so deadpan that the audience roared with laughter. Jax, sensing blood in the water, pressed on. Rumor has it you funded Elena's shop, Daniel. Are you guilty of being a hopeless romantic? Daniel shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to support her dream because she's brilliant, but she's the brains of the operation. I just sign checks and occasionally break the espresso machine. Elena rolled her eyes. He also bought a $200,000 ladder that makes kale smoothies but can't handle regular maintenance. Romantic? Debatable. Practical? Absolutely not. The audience howled. Even Jax seemed caught off guard by their easy rapport. Any wedding bells in the future? He asked, waggling his eyebrows suggestively. Elena deadpanned. Ask me after he survives my cooking. I set spaghetti on fire last week. It's a gift. She's not exaggerating, Daniel added solemnly. The fire department knows us by name. By the segment's end, #LadderLove and #BookstoreBillionaire were trending nationwide. But so was #FriendshipGoals. The aftermath. Their Uber driver nearly drove off the road when they climbed into his backseat. Holy shit, y'all are them, the bookstore people. He grinned at them through the rearview mirror. My wife and I watched you tonight. Y'all are my new OTP. OTP, Daniel whispered. One true pairing, Elena muttered back. Internet speak for we want them to date. The driver nodded enthusiastically. Can I get a selfie? And maybe an autograph? My wife's pregnant, and we were thinking of naming the baby Darcy if it's a girl. After your bookstore romance. Daniel groaned, sinking lower in his seat. Elena, surprising herself, laughed and handed the driver a $20 tip. Only if you consider Ladder as a middle name, she suggested. Darcy Ladder Johnson has a nice ring to it. As they pulled away from the studio, Daniel's phone buzzed continuously with notifications. He turned it off without looking. Well, he said finally, at least your witch trials are over. Elena snorted. Your mother probably has a steak and kindling ready. Probably, he agreed. But she secretly reads romance novels. I found a stash when I was 12. For the first time all day, they both genuinely laughed, not for cameras or audiences or damage control, but for themselves, two unlikely friends navigating absurdity together. Question for reflection. When has humor saved you from an awkward situation? Share your Darcy versus Ladder moment. Chapter 8: The Family Intervention. Constance's Conspiracy. Daniel's family staged the intervention at his penthouse, an event so dire that Beatrice arrived armed with a PowerPoint. The title? Elena, Angel or Antichrist? She's destabilizing the Whitaker legacy. Beatrice cried, clicking to slide 1. Threat level, existential. First, the bookstore. Now Dad's wearing flannel. Uncle Mortimer, a self-proclaimed expert in patterns no one else saw, nodded gravely. She's a sleeper agent. I caught her reading the Communist Manifesto at the park. In reality, it was the Compost Manifesto, a gardening blog. A minor, but, in his mind, chilling distinction. The Great Escape. Elena, tipped off by Daniel, arrived via Uber, armed with a tray of compost cookies and zero regard for social convention. She threw open the door. Surprise. I come bearing snacks and subversive ideologies. Also, Mr. Whitaker, here's your flannel. Daniel's father, Henry, blushed as he took the fabric. They're moist. He meant the cookies. At least, everyone hoped he meant the cookies. As Elena entertained the family with tales of corporate mishaps, Daniel had an epiphany. His family wasn't evil, just deeply, profoundly absurd. The intervention setup. Constance's PowerPoint contained 47 painstakingly curated slides, including Slide 6. Elena's reading list equals communist propaganda, featuring the Compost Manifesto. Slide 23. She's replaced our family crest with this. A photo of Mr. Bingley in a tiny top hat. Slide 42. Suspicious use of kale, a timeline. Uncle Mortimer, emboldened by his audience, ranted. She's using the bookstore as a front. Next, she'll brainwash us with kale smoothies. Elena's entrance. Elena placed a tray of dubiously edible cookies on the table. Surprise. I come bearing carbs and no mind control chips. Constance recoiled. You poisoned them. I composted them, Elena corrected. They're made from kale smoothie leftovers. Judge me. Henry, ever the reluctant diplomat, broke one in half. It's earthy. The breakthrough. Elena plopped onto the couch beside Beatrice. Look, I'm not marrying Daniel. But if I were, I'd make him read Emma and clean toilets. Balance. Beatrice snorted. He'd die. Exactly. So let's call a truce. I'll stop corrupting your family if you stop sending me passive-aggressive pride and prejudice memes. Constance exhaled, crossing her arms. Fine, but the ladder stays. Daniel didn't ask. He didn't want to know. Question for reflection. When has humor disarmed a tense situation? What's your compost cookie moment? Chapter 9. The Open Road. A drunken pact. Elena's 35th birthday was winding down when Daniel tossed her a set of keys. Not to a car, to an era-defining mistake. Happy birthday, he announced, gesturing to a vintage RV parked outside. Let's road trip the Pacific Coast Highway. Elena squinted at him. Are you drunk? Tipsy, he admitted. But hear me out. We turn it into a mobile bookstore. Pop-up shops. Adventure. No necktie hammocks. Elena hesitated. Her bookstore was thriving, and she valued stability. But the open road, and Daniel's complete inability to follow a GPS, was oddly compelling. The cliffhanger. Their journey began with a sputter and a yowl. The RV, christened Darcy's Mobile Epiphany, trundled down Highway 1. Mr. Bingley, perched on the dashboard, launched a full-scale war against seagulls. Daniel multitasked dangerously, driving, flipping through Pride and Prejudice, and arguing with Siri. I said nearest gas station, not nearest jazz station. Oh my God, Elena. This thing just suggested a smooth sax playlist in Monterey. Elena, already regretting life choices, sighed. Give it 5 minutes. You'll be into it. The RV disaster. Romantic as it sounded, Darcy's Mobile Epiphany was a death trap disguised as a dream. A bookshelf that collapsed every time they braked, burying Daniel in Hemingway. A compost toilet that Daniel refused to use. I'll hold it until Texas. Mr. Bingley, now a self-appointed co-pilot, lunging at seagulls through the sunroof. I think he wants blood, Daniel muttered. He's a bookstore cat. He craves drama. First stop, Carmel by the Sea. They parked near a yoga retreat, where the scent of eucalyptus and self-actualization hung thick in the air. Elena set up a makeshift bookstall selling Eat, Pray, Love to spandex-clad tourists who believe Bali could fix their exes. Daniel, in a Kale Smoothie Ladder Survivor t-shirt, approached a vendor. I'll trade you a first edition Emma for access to a real bathroom. The vendor squinted. Hardcover. Daniel upped the ante. Annotated. A deal was struck. The open roads call. As the sun melted into the horizon, Elena flipped through an old-school road atlas. Next stop, Oregon. They've got a Shakespeare in the Park Festival. Daniel groaned. If I hear to be or not to be one more time. Relax, Elena said. I'll protect you from the thespians and the seagulls. Will they survive Daniel's driving? Will the RV evolve into a cult favorite bookstore on wheels? And most importantly, will Mr. Bingley ever make peace with the seagulls? Only the open road knows. Life's a choose-your-own-adventure book. You can close it now or turn the page. What happens next? Does the ladder break? Does Constance find a new conspiracy? Does Mr. Bingley take over Oregon? Subscribe to Whispers of the Mind. Because the best stories aren't told, they're lived. And we're just getting started. Like the chaos? Subscribing takes 2 seconds. Not subscribing means never knowing if Daniel survives Oregon. Choose wisely.